It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina, featuring industry outlooks, panel discussions on trending topics, and interviews with business executives, community leaders, and government officials. And now, coming to you from the Drum Creative Studio, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. If you are keeping score, we are up to episode number 31. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins, and as always, we are coming to you from the Drum Creative Studios. You know, we talk about workforce issues on this show quite a lot. As a matter of fact, just a couple episodes ago, we were talking about workforce trends. Today, we're going to be talking about them again. And there is not an educational institution in the upstate of South Carolina that does any more to address workforce challenges than our friends over at Greenville Technical College. I want to get a shout out to those guys because they are one of the reasons that we're able to bring this content to you each week. They are a partner of ours in producing content, and they are very involved in addressing workforce issues. They not only put employees, students in our manufacturing facilities, but they put nurses in our hospitals, and they continue to provide continuing education opportunities for folks just like you, business executives that want to expand their career. So again, thank you to Greenville Technical College for helping us out. You know, I'll be joined by two guests today. And again, we're talking about workforce development issues. One of those guests is Marc Mullis. Marc is the founder and the CEO of Payformance Partners, and we are going to be talking about compensation ROI and pay transparency today. And another conversation is going to be with Brett Cooper. He is the Senior Manager for Customer Relations and Retention at HTI, or Human Technologies Incorporated. And Brett's going to be on the show, and he's going to share some insight on some glaring training deficits that now exist with our supervisors. So it'll be interesting to hear what those guys have to say. But before we get into that, we're going to do a quick segment that we do from time to time called An Executive That You Should Know. And it's just a few-minute conversation that I have with an executive in South Carolina. And today we're going to meet Michael Oliver. Michael is in public relations at Metromont, and he's a very interesting young man, and I look forward to you hearing this conversation. Again, it'll only take a few minutes for you to meet Michael, and then we will be right back to hear from Marc Mullis from Payformance Partners. See you in a minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a segment that we do from time to time called An Executive You Should Know. And again, this is brought to you by Greenville Technical College. They make it possible for us to bring this content to you today and to meet executives in South Carolina that are worth you knowing, and today is no different. I'm talking to Michael Oliver today. Michael is in public relations at Metromont. Michael, welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rick.
It is good to have you here, pal. Are you from South Carolina?
Yes, sir. Originally from South Carolina.
Whereabouts?
Greenville.
You're from Greenville.
Yes, sir.
You started working at Metromont not too long ago. How long you been with them?
2019, and I've been with Metromont for 4 years.
Okay. And tell me about Metromont. What do they do?
Yes, sir. So we're a precast concrete manufacturer. So we build parking garages, multifamily housing, data centers, industrial warehouse, and anything like commercial-wise, we can build out of precast concrete.
How about that? So a general contractor, so to speak?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, got it. And tell me a little bit about what you do. I know you're in public relations. I know you have a lot to do with social media, which is huge these days. And so I look forward to getting a young professional's take on social media. But give us an idea of what you do there.
Yes, sir. So when it comes to Metromont's LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram accounts, I manage all those accounts. When it comes to any trade show events that we have, career fairs, or anything in the community, I help out a lot, and I'm involved with that also.
I see. And you handle public relations efforts on their behalf?
Yes, sir.
You know, social media, my gosh, I'm an old fellow, okay? And so I'm constantly trying to make sure that I'm up to speed with social media. Mm-hmm. You being a younger professional like you are, of course, it comes way more natural to you. What's the most important social media channel for Metromont?
The most important one is our LinkedIn. We have like a big audience on there. And then also like our Facebook page is very big. I mean, when we do like posts that's like family oriented, like a lot of people engage on those. And now with LinkedIn, because everybody's on LinkedIn now, so you can do like reels, you can create highlights, and you can even go live now. So Instagram is starting to become a big one for us also.
And can you do all that stuff in-house at Metromont? You yourself creating the reels and
Yes, sir.
videos and that kind of thing? You do that? You all have the equipment there to handle that?
Yes, sir. My team and I, we come together and we'll create the posts, we'll get the pictures, and sometimes we'll go out to different job sites and everything and just create the photos and videos to put out for our target audiences.
You enjoy it?
I love it. Yes, sir.
You know, you got your start, Michael, at Greenville Technical College, you came out of there a few years ago?
Yes, sir.
4 years ago?
Yes, sir.
What was your degree in?
Marketing.
Yeah, did you enjoy your time there?
I did. I love it.
Yeah. You know, everybody that I talk to that comes from Greenville Tech has such fantastic things to say. What is it about the school that people seem to love so much?
The culture. And it just goes back to Greenville Tech's core values of start, stay, and succeed. And when I very first started at Greenville Tech, I had a plan I wanted to finish in 2 years. So that was my start. And then I had to stay there. So I had to stay the course. And that way I know what classes to take. And one thing that I really enjoyed the most was I went to the course evaluation and I printed that sheet out, and each course that I went through, I always highlight once I got done with it. And then I got to the fall semester, my final year, and I'm like, okay, I got 10 classes left, so I'm just going to buckle down and just take 5 first semester, 5 second semester, and then end up getting those, and then it just goes to the last one, succeed. Just being able to succeed in the classroom, succeed outside the classroom, in the community, and just create that value to inspire others that you can make a difference in the community. You just start, stay, and succeed.
Michael, that is really, really well said. Good job. Michael, it's a pleasure to meet you.
You as well. Thank you.
Folks, that's Michael Oliver. He is in public relations and social media at Metromont. And folks, that concludes another segment that we call An Executive You Should Know. Let's get back to the episode. Let's talk business. See you next time. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Business South Carolina. I am your host, Rick Jenkins. I hope you enjoyed that segment with the business executive you should know. That was Michael Oliver. He's a really good guy. I enjoyed that talk with him, and I hope you did too. Once again, thanks to Greenville Technical College for making a lot of this content possible today. We appreciate their partnership. As I mentioned at the onset, one of the hottest topics in business trends today is workforce development. And on this show, if you've been watching it over the past few months, we talk about workforce a whole lot. Whether we are talking about labor shortages or the skills gap or hybrid work schedules or how COVID impacted things, or maybe even something like quiet quitting, which cracks me up every time I think about it. Regardless of what it is, we're talking about workforce a whole lot, and today is not going to be an exception. We're going to talk about two things that I'm not overly familiar with, but I look forward to hearing this guy talking about it. One is pay transparency. It's been in the news a lot, and there has been some changes that makes that even more of a topic of interest than it was before. And then we're also going to talk about compensation ROI. And here to help me have the conversation is Marc Mullis. Marc has joined us before, and he is back for a second go of it. He is the founder and the CEO at Payformance Partners. Marc, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rick.
It's good to have you here, man. You were with me, I don't know, it's been a few months now since the last time we sit down.
Yeah.
And you came down to us to the studio here in Greenville. Our studio's in Greenville. From where again?
Drum Studios in Greenville, coming from Fort Thrill, South Carolina.
Fort Thrill, South Carolina.
Fort Mill, for those that aren't familiar.
That's right. Fort Mill. Anyway, it's good that you made the trip down here. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rick. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Let's talk about you for a second before we get into these trends that I was discussing. You have 20 years of experience. 20 years of experience in compensation, performance, something called talent strategy design. Before we go anywhere, tell me what that means.
Yeah, so we are a compensation consulting firm, ultimately. We help, whether you call it HR, people and culture, there's all kinds of names for it these days, but we help those individuals within those companies and CFOs and CEOs really determine their pay strategy. And we do a lot of stuff around HR, but we're really focused a lot on compensation, which, as you mentioned, is a very hot topic, and over the past few years has become increasingly difficult.
Right. The last time we talked, we discussed, of course, compensation or ROI, and I had never heard the terminology before, and of course it makes sense. It's logical, but I had never stopped to think about it that way. But you can get a compensation ROI. Tell me how one goes about doing such a thing.
Yes, absolutely. So this is a metric that a lot of CEOs and CFOs, if they're not looking at, should be looking at. So essentially, from a math perspective, if you say in a manufacturing plant, for example, if you hire one person, is that one machinist going to increase your revenue at least enough to cover that person's compensation? So that would be 100% ROI. You have one person, right. Their comp is completely covered by the extra product that they produce.
Right.
Now, in different industries, that number is going to be different. You hope it's not below 100, but different industries with different profit margins, different productivity measurements, going to be a little bit different on numbers. So if you're comparing apples to apples, look within your own industry.
Got it. We have experienced an historic labor market over the last several years. And before COVID hit, and COVID hit in March of 2020, and we know how COVID played havoc with workforce and all the things that are happening there. But, right before COVID hit, we were at all-time lows in unemployment rates, right? Crazy, crazy lows in the 2% range in South Carolina, upper twos. And then COVID hits. And then all of a sudden, we go on this roller coaster, right? And I think before COVID hit, that employers, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but employers had all the leverage in the employer-employee relationship. And after COVID hit, I think that pendulum swung all the way to the other side, not in every single industry, but in many of them, where the employee began to have the leverage in that relationship, so to speak. Do you feel, and before we get into some of this stuff, I just want to get your thoughts on this from a 30,000-foot view. Has that pendulum begun now to swing back, and where are we now in relation to where we once were?
I think it is swinging back. By the way, we've got some good unemployment numbers now.
Yes, we do.
So it's fantastic that we've got that number back down where it should be. I think it was 3.7 nationwide last I saw. It's almost like, Rick, we've opened Pandora's box with the remote work. That's where it really started with pandemic and everyone trying to work from home as much as possible. Of course, that doesn't work in manufacturing. They had to figure out different ways around that, right? But a lot of industries, you can do remote work, and this younger generation of people, well, let me go at it from my generation and older, boomers and Gen X, we've gone into an office for all of our careers, right? And that's just the way it went. That's the traditional method. Didn't think any way different. When the pandemic hit and we were forced to go remote, then it just opened Pandora's box to not only remote work, but compensation. People were moving companies because now you don't have to live in the same city as where you work. Right. So now we've got this, as you described it, a roller coaster, and we're painting with a broad brush here, but still it was and still remains a little bit of a roller coaster. In 20 plus years of doing comp, I've not seen this much activity and this much interest around companies saying, hey, look, we have to have a compensation program in place or else we're not going to survive.
Well, let's talk about that. And so one of the ways that the employees began to hold some of that leverage is, well, a couple years ago, we had this thing called the Great Resignation, right? Everybody just said, you know what, I'm quitting. I can find something better. I want to go home. I want to work from home. And as I said, they began to have the leverage, which meant that they began to have leverage in the negotiation process for how much I'm going to get paid, which makes it harder for smaller and mid-sized, companies to try and figure that out.
Right.
So let's talk about pay solutions and what can be done now. So first, do they still have leverage enough to where they are able to set a price for their services more so than they had in the past? And if so, how are companies handling that, and what are some solutions that you might have for them?
Yeah, look, I think the whole situation is exacerbated by the fact that we have a 5 generations and now 6 coming in and a little bit of work people in the workforce, right? And they all think differently about compensation. Baby boomers, hey, look, you pay me what you pay me. I come to work every day. I put the work in, and that's fantastic. And on the other end of the spectrum It's almost like hey, we've seen this new world as younger folks are graduating college and entering the work world. They're entering into a situation where employees have a bit of the upper hand. So that's what they're growing up in. So I don't see it swinging fully back to employers having full leverage because of that. The younger generation is going to force us to stick to a balanced approach. I think they're going to say, look, this is what I'm worth, and this is what you should pay me. And I've researched the market. There's so much data out there, and we know this younger generation is so good at getting on technology and finding answers. There's a person named Hannah Williams. She started a company called Pay Transparency Street. She goes on the streets of major cities and asks people what their compensation is. I mean, that's just full transparency right there. And a lot of people are answering. And that has really become a thing here is people are talking about, when I first started working, you didn't talk about your salary. You didn't talk about how much you made. You could, in some companies, you could get fired for that. Not nowadays. Nowadays, as soon as someone walks out with their salary increase paper, they're telling everyone in the office, they're telling everyone on their Instagram feed, they're telling. Yeah. So it's the data is out there. And as I said, it's like opening Pandora's box. It's going to be hard to get it closed again.
So if, let me kind of walk this through in a real world application, so to speak. Let's say I'm a CEO, and I'm a CEO of a small company that has about 40 employees. And my margins are razor thin already. And now I have folks that are demanding more pay. And if they're not going to get pay, I realize I'm going to have to be competitive, right? I'm either going to have to pay them or I'm going to have to bring in somebody else. Right. You provide solutions and show folks how to get an ROI out of wages, right?
Right.
What in the world can you do within those circumstances? It sounds to me like Mr. or Miss CEO is going to have to just completely rethink how they've done business in the past.
So I don't think they're going to necessarily have to rethink their entire business strategy, but certainly their compensation strategy if they don't have one. And look, I don't want to put this all on younger generation or the pandemic coming out either. I mean, as a nation, I think a lot of companies have mismanaged compensation or not had a comp program and just kind of thumb in the air winging it. So what we do to come in, what we do to help is we come in and do a few things that are really fairly, there's a lot of expertise involved in it just that we've picked up over the years. But we come in and research the labor market, which we have all the data for that. And we can tell you this position should be paid this. If you've got someone that's proficient in the job, highly proficient, maybe a little bit more. If they're just starting in that job, maybe a little bit lower. But we teach them about what the labor market is and how to use it. Then we provide a gap analysis. So we say, here's what your employees are getting paid. Here's what the labor market is paying for those same roles. And here's your gap. Now, what that ultimately is going to do is we believe in coming into a client and saying, look, we're not going to try to force you to spend more money. We know margins are tight. We know the economy is picking back up, which, by the way, GDP 2.2 yesterday reported was fantastic. So we know it's coming back, but still, budgets are tight. So we're not going to try to force you to spend more money. We're going to show you how to spend money in a better way. So salary increases, for example, annual salary increase. You've got all these employees that have different ratings, right? Performance ratings, and you're paying for performance. If you do a peanut butter spread of 3% to everyone, you're wasting money on these low performers. You could be taking that money and spending it on the higher performers, and you're not spending more money. You're just spending the same money in a better way. So,
well, excuse me, but both of those employees are existing employees, so you're not going to go to the lower performer and say, hey, look, we're reducing your salary. You could, but likely you're not going to do that. So I'm assuming you're talking something along the lines of incentive pay, commission pay, incentivizing them in a different manner. Is that what I'm hearing? Maybe you go, I'm going to try to read your mind here. Maybe you go to the lower performing folks and say, we're going to change the way you're paid a little bit. You're going to get more on the commission side. And so if you do hit your goals, you're going to make even more. Is this something?
So there's a couple of things. And one, I want to be clear about the 3%. If you're spending money, you're not necessarily taking their salaries down. You're just not giving them an additional 3%. And you're taking that 3% and giving your high performers 6%. Or giving them 1% and spending 5% up here. So it's about the distribution of the same budget in better ways. So there's that piece where you're spending the differences in your budget, but also you mentioned incentive pay. You could absolutely, and a lot of smaller companies do this. If you're a smaller company that's just starting out, then you probably do put a little more, and you should, into variable compensation. So incentives, bonuses, when the company wins, the employees win, right? As opposed to base salary, which is a fixed cost that you carry on your books all the time. So you can change that mix up and have more on the variable side and not carry as much fixed cost. That absolutely is an approach that we are doing and we are seeing in the market.
So do some companies just call you guys and say, I want you to come into my market and tell me what I should be paying, and that's the extent of what I need you to do for me?
Yes. They absolutely do that. I would coach them and encourage them to take it one step, maybe 2 steps further, and build out the salary ranges so you can be prepared for pay transparency, which I know we're going to talk about. That's a huge topic. And so being prepared for pay transparency, making sure you have internal equity, and then training. Training is huge. Look, I'm a numbers guy. I'm a comp geek through and through. But you can build the best comp plan in the world, and if you don't train your managers and employees on the comp program, it's all for nothing. I think one of the biggest misses we have in all of workforce is a high-level individual contributor moving to its first management position. And he or she has no idea how to manage people. They were a great individual contributor, but now we need to train them how to be a manager. And a lot of that is around compensation and how to manage compensation and make good decisions.
Let's talk about pay transparency. Like I said, I wasn't, until we started talking, before we came on the air, I wasn't overly familiar with the term, even though the term, of course, is completely logical. But I just hadn't heard it used a lot. And so as I was beginning to, prepare for the conversation, I see that 13 states now have enacted some sort of pay transparency laws. Tell me what that law might look like, and are those laws in South Carolina, or might they be?
So at this point, not in South Carolina, although it is being discussed.
Okay.
So pay transparency is, but I will say this, if you are operating in South Carolina and you have operations in other states around the country, you still have to manage through the pay transparency laws of those states. And there are 13 of them right now, and lots more coming on board. So these laws are being passed at the state level pretty regularly. So pay transparency, if you think about when you go look for a job, we used to open the newspaper long ago, but nowadays...
Still remember.
Nowadays we go online, right? And we look at Indeed or Glassdoor or any of those. So pay transparency laws, most of the states, this is the overarching theme, is if you're posting a job for it within that state, then you have to post a salary range. And it has to be a reasonable salary range. There is a large bank in Manhattan, when the law first passed, that tried to get away with a range of $2 to $2 million. And they got fined and slapped on the wrist and all that good stuff. So that's pay transparency. And it's really... Yes, it is being driven by government, by laws, but it's also being driven again by the workforce, the generations of workforce that we have now really want transparency. I go talk every year at the College of Charleston, my alumni, which, by the way, they're doing fantastic in basketball. Go Cougars, our city. But I go down and talk to the seniors at the College of Charleston every year about, when you graduate, here's what comp looks like at companies, because they have no idea. That's not something that's taught in universities, although it should be, at least a piece of it. So when I talk to them about this, one of the questions that we get every time, and it's asked every single time, is, when I go interview for a job, why are they asking me what I want to be paid? Why don't they tell me what they're paying for the job? They really don't understand this. So that's another thing that's being it's not just by laws, but it's by the workforce saying, hey, we want to know what you're paying for this job or we're not going to apply for it.
Right. So a lot of times, and I've done it myself over the years, of course, it's the way we used to do business is you would say, what is your salary expectations? At some point, will that not be allowed?
Yes. And in some states it already is. Yes.
Right.
You can't ask salary history. So what did you make at your last job? Not a valid question anymore. Not a fair question.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So South Carolina is sooner or later.
Sooner or later, yes, it's coming. I would say it's probably on the later side. But again, even if you're operating in South Carolina and you have operations outside in other states, you need to be paying attention to this. And even if the law is not passed in South Carolina, I think you're really going to be in the back seat if you're not providing salary ranges, because the folks coming into the workforce now are just not going to apply for the job if they don't see a salary range.
Well, that's one of the challenges that that would accompany something like that. What are some other challenges that bosses might have to fight against?
Career development. That's another place where we are focusing a lot with our clients, and actually we're getting a lot of calls about job architecture, career frameworks, whatever you want to call it. People coming into jobs now are not just interviewing for that job. They're also in that interview asking about, okay, well, what do I need to get to the next level? What do I need to get to the level 2 of this job or senior level of this job? Internal folks are asking, hey, what skills do I need to get to the next level of my career within this company? So for companies that don't have clearly defined career paths, with skills at each, understanding what skills gaps are between each, encouraging employees to go look and see what skills they should gain in order to develop and get to that next level. I think they're going to fall behind there too if companies aren't doing that.
What state, is there a state next to us or close to us that might have already enacted laws? North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, for example.
Around pay transparency?
Yeah.
North Carolina has had some discussions about it for sure. I think that might be one of the next closest ones to go.
Got it. Let's change direction here for a minute, Mark. I want to talk about annual salary reviews. I know they kind of pop up all year round, and depending on how you do things within your company, will depend on how much you got going on at any given time. But now is a pretty big time for that kind of thing. Is that right?
It absolutely is. Yeah, a lot of companies base their annual salary reviews on their fiscal year end. So, and typically annual salary reviews come along with incentive payouts as well. So if you've got an annual incentive plan, you want to wait till the end of the year, determine what your revenue is, your profit margin, whatever those metrics are, and see how much you achieved versus those goals so you can pay out your incentives. At the same time, you're looking to see, okay, well, how did we do last year and how much can we afford in salary increases for the following year? A lot of companies are Jan 1 fiscal year, so now's the time of year when a lot of people in culture, HR, whatever you want to call them, are heads down. Comp geeks are doing their annual salary reviews right now. So it's a busy time of year for them.
And I would assume that means it's a busy time of year for you guys.
It is. It is. We currently are engaged in a good number of implementations of technology with compensation planning. We partner with a company called PayScale. They have a fantastic piece of technology that helps this process be more efficient. A lot of companies really are still using Excel. I was just visiting a local manufacturing company here, a client of ours, right before I came over, and we were talking about this process, and they're still in Excel and the size and the eye rolls and the whole thing, right? But this technology that we're implementing with a lot of our clients, it makes it way more efficient. It provides a budget, the roll-up budget, the approvals that go from supervisor to manager all the way up to CEO for approval of not only incentives, but annual salary reviews as well.
How can you guys make things easier for folks at this busy time of year?
I think it's that technology, and technology is huge, and the data also is huge. So we have both of those. We can certainly help implement that and and try to get some sanity back to those competent HR people at this time of year.
Right. Love the name, by the way, Payformance. That's a great play on words. Mark, it was really good talking to you again.
Thanks so much, Rick. Great to be here.
You're welcome, folks. That is Marc Mullis. He is the CEO and the founder at Payformance Partners. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation about workforce challenges with Brett Cooper. He is the Senior Manager of Customer Relations and Retention at HTI, or Human Technologies Incorporated. We'll be right back.
I bet you want a website that drums up business. You see, every business wants to have an effective online presence that helps their business grow. We guide you through our process that will drive results by clarifying your message with a beautiful design that's strategically optimized for search. Stop wasting your time and money on an ineffective website and let us help you drum up business by designing a website that speaks to your audience and delivers results.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Business South Carolina. It's good to have you with us today. We're going to continue our conversation about workforce development trends. And next up for us to talk to today, and I want you to meet this guy. His name is Brett Cooper. Brett is the Senior Manager for Customer Relations and Retention at Human Technologies Incorporated, or HTI. As you can see up here on the screen, interesting topic today. The topic is the ugly truth about today's leaders. There is a training deficit with today's leaders, and companies have to recognize it and proactively do things to fix that. And when I was told that, Brett, this is what you wanted to talk about, I was excited. I love this topic, or the name of the topic, the ugly truth about today's leaders. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, sure. I'm glad that you are here. Folks over at HTI join us from time to time, and I always enjoy the conversation. And so let's, before we get into it, though, before we get into the ugly truth, let's talk about you for a second.
Sure.
Are you from around here?
I'm just a country boy from Woodruff, South Carolina. So, about 20, 25 minutes down the road.
Country boy from Woodruff.
Yeah. So
dig it.
live in Simpsonville. So I've traveled all over the upstate of South Carolina.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a country boy from Kentucky.
Okay.
But I have been in the upstate now for 21 years, and I also live out in Simpsonville. Tell me about HTI. I mean, large staffing firm, largest one in South Carolina, but you do so much more than that. Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of people, when we talk about what we do, staffing is a big component of it. But over the years, we've helped customers with their logistics functions. With training, we actually have a new group. I say a new group, probably been around now for about 2 or 3 years, called Workplace Strategies, which is more consultative, where we go in and we do training and we do wage analysis, a lot of different things that maybe we were doing for customers, but it's been a big focus of ours over the last 2 or 3 years.
Right. Good stuff, Brett. It's good to have you, like I say. So are you ready to talk business?
Absolutely.
Let's talk business. The ugly truth about today's leaders. Like I said, I love it. Tell me what it means.
So, Rick, what has become very apparent, especially over the last, 5 years of my career, is that there's 2 different issues that we're having. We're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, right? So we're trying to take maybe someone who is good, say for instance, if we have an assembly operator who's a dynamite assembly operator, and we tap that person on the shoulder and expect them to be a great team leader overnight.
Right.
Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people are just good assembly operators, and that's okay. And then once we do identify that person who maybe is a good candidate for that entry level, for that supervisory role, is we, for a lack of a better way to put it, we throw them in the water and expect them to sink or swim, right? And, some swim, some sink, right? So again, it's just a huge issue across the industry. Some companies are better than others, but again, there is a huge gap in getting people, number one, who are qualified to do it, and number two, to get those qualified people to be successful.
Yeah. We're making bad decisions.
We're making some decisions that we probably should look at a couple of times before we make them.
I'm guessing though that this problem is exacerbated by the fact that it is definitely hard to find good folks, right? We have a labor shortage. And when you have a terrible labor shortage and you just can't find folks, sometimes you don't have a choice but to take a chance on this person that otherwise you might not. But let's face it, what am I going to do? At least that's a known entity.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's correct. We've done the same thing. We call it tapping.
Yes.
And sometimes we have an employee with high potential, and we tap them to do something that maybe they're not ready to do, or not qualified to do, or not trained to do. And again, just kind of hope for the best outcome.
Yeah. One way to tackle the issue is on the back end with continuing education opportunities or training opportunities.
Correct.
And I would assume more and more companies these days are having to resort to that to train, upskill their employees.
That is correct. And there's a lot of data out there, a lot of statistics, and I think what we see is that there's two different things. There are companies that do provide opportunities, and people don't take advantage of those opportunities. And then again, some companies think that it's just too much of a front end investment on someone, and don't really see the potential or the end result, lurking.
Correct. There has been a problem for a long time with, and you hear it all the time from folks like you and from just managers who are having to hire folks, that employees enter the workforce today with poor soft skills. And we hear that all the time. Is that also a problem now if we are making decisions about supervisors that we might not normally make? Are we also losing soft skills at the supervisory level?
We are. And one thing that we've started doing internally is we have a couple of different leadership classes that we've put in place really over the last 20 years, but really been a big focus on those entry-level people over the last probably 5 years or so. And again, what we do is we take those people and we gauge their interest. So we're taking willing participants, right? So we're not tapping people. We're asking people to volunteer to learn more about supervision, learn more about management, and ease them into training modules that give them some exposure to what life as a supervisor, as a team lead, as a manager, really how that really occurs, and doing a lot of scenario based, a lot of back and forth, a lot of role play. So again, we've seen the need for that, and what we're trying to do is almost create ourselves a minor league for our next supervision, right? For our next management. So that's what we're trying to do.
So HTI more and more involved, not just HTI, just in general, staffing companies, consultation. I want to get away from using the term staffing agency because that's not really indicative of what you do, but more consultory and
correct.
More and more.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more. It's interesting when we first started talking about this, Caitlin and I internally. I was talking to her about a customer that I was at a couple of years ago, doing some observations, and I wanted to go and talk to the team lead on the line. So I just sat back and I observed the line for 5 or 10 minutes, and it was blatantly obvious who the team lead was. The team lead was the person who was trying to fill gaps on the line, who was running the line, who was documenting things, and come to find out, those are the people that are probably the most important person in your plant, in your manufacturing facility, because again, they're the ones who at the end of the day are responsible for getting output, who are responsible for making sure that gaps are covered. And what we find is those people are probably not getting the basic training that they need. Again, like you talked about the soft skills, how to counsel someone, how to do progressive discipline, how to do an incident report, all these things that come along with being a supervisor, a team lead, a manager. We're just expecting these people to kind of get it on the fly. And again, some are successful, some are not.
Sounds like companies just need to change the way that they have approached things in the past. If you're going to hire from within more so than you've ever done before because of labor shortages, you probably got to incorporate more training than you have ever done so in the past, and different kinds of training.
That's correct. So internally and externally, we do what we call it. It's a work stay survey. We used to call it a workplace forensics report. And we talk about different things, and we ask questions, and we do surveys, and we do interviews. And the two things that always come up are communication and training. They're always our top two issues that we see in companies. And really internally, we take a look in the mirror and we do them ourselves. And again, training and communication are our top two issues. So we have made a concerted effort over the last couple of years to make sure that our employees have adequate training and have, again, just the basics that they need to do their jobs.
Right. I want to stick on that for a second. Before we came on the air, you and I were talking a little bit about the things, how we wanted the conversation to go, and you provided a few solutions that you all often use, and you already touched on them a little bit. I want to go back through them a little bit. So let me tee you up here.
Sure.
And you give me some information about each. Let's start with the predictive index.
Okay.
Tell me about it.
So the predictive index, I've been using it for almost 30 years now. Okay. Personality indicator, shows different drives, shows judgment, different things like that. So we really, and the PI is really starting to evolve into a way to help guide someone, or maybe a career path, right? So, say for instance, if we were to have a controller opening, right? So somebody who is dealing with company finances, and we look at their D, which is their attention to detail, and they have a low attention to detail. That's probably not somebody we want to put down that financial path, right? But there are other paths that person could go down. So that's just one example of how maybe we would use that to lead someone into maybe a role or a career.
Right. So, just thinking that through for a second, you go into a company and you survey their employees in some fashion to kind of come up with descriptors of those employees to provide the company some kind of blueprint maybe for who you may promote or who maybe you shouldn't into certain types of jobs.
Right.
Is that what we're talking about?
That can be part of it as well, correct.
Talk also about strengths training.
Okay, so strengths we probably started using about 10 years ago. So it's through Gallup.
Yeah.
And really a strength, the way it was designed was we're talking about square pegs and round holes, right?
Right.
Is that, we measure 32 different traits and strengths. And what we found is let's not put people who, let's put them in roles that play to what they're already good at, and not put them in roles where they're deficient and expect them to get better, right? So again, we've been utilizing that, and again, it's helpful because again, we can play to the characteristics that I'm good at, empathy, developing things that's what I'm good at. So let's put Brett in roles where we can utilize those, those things that I'm good at, right? And let's don't put me in a position to where I have deficiencies, right?
Right. You already touched on this a little bit, but let's go through it a little again. Workstay analysis.
So yeah, it just evolved recently. So it really revolves around a couple of different things. So we will go out and we survey all the associates in the facility. And on top of that, we meet with what we call the stakeholders, who are the decision makers. So at the end of the day, when we make a decision that we're going to go down this path, this is the group who has the authority to do that. Then we also talk to what we call it internally the MLT, our middle leadership team, our supervisors, our managers. And let's talk to them, and again, ask them the same questions that we're asking the stakeholders, that we're asking the associates, so we can get an apples to apples comparison on how things are perceived from not only the stakeholders, but also the associates as well, and then that middle leadership team.
Are there other types of behavioral tools that companies are using more often these days?
So with us, again, we mainly we use the predictive index and the and strengths. But there's, you got Myers-Briggs, and you've got a lot of different tools out there that will at least show people what their interests are, and maybe based off those interests, a career path for those individuals. Herb does this a lot. You talked about Herb earlier, who was our CEO. It's not uncommon for him to sit down and do a career assessment with someone's kid who's in high school. Mm-hmm. And, whether it's going to be more of a like my daughter, she's going to be an English professor. So again, when we did it with her, it showed that she's more of more of the liberal arts side of things versus maybe my wife, who was an engineer, more technical, more manufacturing related.
Talking about Herb Dew, CEO and founder of HTI. I'm going to get you out of here on this. I talked to Marc Mullis about this in the prior segment. Again, Marc, CEO at Payformance Partners, and I asked him this, and I want to get your take on it. COVID hit in March of 2020. Pre-COVID, incredibly low, historically low unemployment numbers. March hit, COVID hit, and all of a sudden everything goes crazy, right? And over the ensuing 4 years, it has been just a complete roller coaster. That roller coaster might have more hills and more dips depending on the industry that we're talking about, but all of them have a lot of dips and a lot of hills, right?
Right.
It seems to me that pre-COVID, when we're talking about an employer-employee relationship, pre-COVID, the employers had all the leverage. At some point, that changed after COVID hit, and employees seemed to have most of the leverage. Hence things like quiet quitting,
correct,
the Great Resignation, and all those sorts of things. However, it seems also that pendulum has begun to swing back toward the middle to some degree. What are you finding?
I totally agree with that. I was talking to our vice president of operations just this past week, and we were talking about how, post-COVID, as we were coming out of COVID, we had probably double the number of jobs that we're working right now. And really, I think we're in a better place now with half of those jobs. And I think there's something to that. I think people are seeing the value in having a job and staying with a company and building some tenure. So I do agree with that. I think the pendulum has definitely swung back to where it's more in that middle ground now.
Brett, thanks for joining.
No, appreciate it. Thank you, Rick.
It's good stuff. Folks, that is Brett Cooper. He is with HTI, or Human Technologies Incorporated, the Senior Manager for Customer Relations and Retention. And that completes another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. Appreciate you joining us, and we will see you next time.